meeting you right where you are on your foster care journey. This is the Forgotten Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Forgotten Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Cabe, and I am so happy to be with you. If you are part of the foster care community, passionate about serving, or simply interested in learning more, we are here for you. In every episode of this podcast, you will hear stories from men and women who have experienced foster care to one degree or another. They may have grown up in the system, are caseworkers, foster parents, or others who are here to bring you hope or encouragement. If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe and share it with a friend. And remember, you are not alone. I hope you enjoy the Forgotten Podcast. Well, Serena, I am so happy to have you on the show today. I want to tell our listeners a little bit about who you are before we get in. So you are a Supervised Visitation Specialist. You are a parenting coach. You've written a children's book. And you have your degree in health and human services. And I know that's just a very tiny piece of who you are. But the roles that you wear today really do have a direct correlation to your childhood experiences, don't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
In fact, from 10 to 17, you spent time, you grew up really your entire teenage years pretty much in foster care. You were in multiple homes. You were cared for by multiple foster parents. And as we talk through this today, I know I would love to hear how this has impacted you. Your childhood impacted you, but also, hold on, I'm going to pause, Serena. See, this is what happens. Sometimes you repeat yourself, so it's all good. So I'm pausing. I'm going to start from 10 to 17 just for editing purposes here. So from 10 to 17 years old, you grew up in foster care. You were in multiple homes. You were cared for by multiple foster parents. And I would love to hear how this impacted you as a child and even into adulthood, if you're willing to share that. But before we dive in, do you remember about that day that you first entered foster care?
I do. Yeah. It was actually kind of a rough patch in our lives. We were going through a transition. We had just been put out of our home in Washington State, and we're trying to figure out, where are we going to go from here? So we had moved to Oregon at that time. But the day that I actually went into care, it was more of like a what's happening, like we were, I think I was in 5th grade. My sister was in, 2nd grade, I believe. And social worker showed up to the school, had to take us back to our house, and there was trash bags, and we had to get up all of our stuff. They had to take us to the DSHS office, DHS. And we were pretty much just kind of clueless at that point of like, what the heck, what's happening? Where's our mom at? We had to sit at the office for hours as they were on the phone calling for someone to come get us. And then, we spent our first night with strangers.
Wow. So you're the oldest of two?
Yes. Yep. The oldest of 3 now.
Of three. Okay. So at that time, you're only in 5th grade. I'm thinking of my son. My youngest son is in 5th grade. He is 10. So he is the age you were.
Right.
Did you feel this sense of like, I've got to take care of the younger ones? Or did you feel more just like this complete, what's happening? Or maybe a little of both?
Absolutely. Yeah. I just felt like, my sister was so young. I'm still so young. I don't know what's happening, but I'm doing everything in my power to make sure that I am just supporting her and being there for her. I did practically raised her, growing up in the home. And so I've always just been, there for her. So it was just natural for me. But now she needed me more than ever. So I just felt like, I'm the big sister here, and I need to really show up and be present for her right now.
Wow. Do you remember asking questions, finding out anything about your mom? Like, were they giving any answers? How was that?
Yeah, so I did ask, where's my mom? When am I going to go home? And they just pretty much told me, she's going to be away for a while. We're going to have you stay with a couple people for now, and your mom's working on some stuff, and, you're going to be home soon. And this was around Christmas time. So this was in November. And so, the foster family was like asking us what we want for Christmas. And we're all like, whoa, like we're going back with our mom. We're going to be with our mom around Christmas time. So, don't worry about getting us any Christmas gifts. And, that short amount of time of like, oh, we're only going to be here for a few weeks turned into a few years. And so, yeah, it was just pretty tough.
That's so tough. And I would just love to know, like, what is it like walking into a stranger's house in a time like this when everything's kind of, nothing's normal? Yeah,
I just think that at the time it was just so scary. You know what I mean? Like it was a different culture. We're in a different state already because we moved.
That's right.
And I think, there were other kids in the home, so it was just so hard to get used to. And obviously we didn't sleep for a couple nights because it's like, ooh, where are we? Thinking about our mom, what's she doing? We haven't talked to her or seen her. I'm trying to be there for my sister, but also trying to cope with everything going on myself. So yeah, just a lot of anxiety and just sadness at that time.
Wow. So as you started in, at 10 and you were in this home, and I know throughout your journey, you've been in multiple homes. So would you walk us through a little bit of the journey of moving and maybe why? We'll start with just like, tell us how many homes you were in and just in general, kind of that.
Yeah. So I want to say I was in a total of about 5 or 6 homes over a span of that 7-year period. Okay. I want to say, obviously the first home I went into was just like an emergency placement. I was just there for about a week until they could find someone that could take me more long term. And so it's actually kind of bounces back and forth between like family and actual foster parents. So the first foster family that actually took us in was actually my sister's biological grandparents. So we actually knew them and we actually got to stay with them. And, it was great. It was someone that we knew, and we were so excited when we seen them at the DSHS office to pick us up. It's like, oh my gosh, after spending a week with someone that we actually have no idea who they are, it was so nice to see someone who we were familiar with. Yeah. So we ended up staying there for a couple years, and there had been just some issues with me and the grandmother. And we ended up getting removed from that placement, just due to, some of the ways that they disciplined us. It just wasn't working out. So we ended up going to another foster home, and this one it always makes me super emotional, but this one I will forever cherish. This home right here. This was the 3rd placement. And I'll never forget, it was Miss Susan and Mr. Dave, super sweet older couple. So it was definitely new because we're like, oh my goodness, we're with some elderly people here. But, how's this going to work? Because we're so rambunctious and we need so many things. But the foster mom worked at a gymnastics and dance studio, which is something that we always dreamed about doing, but we never got the opportunity to do. And so we were in recitals and nutcrackers and the mini Olympics, and we got to do so many different things staying there. I want to say like a year into it, my sister actually ended up going with her dad, which was, I'd rather it be her than me because, I'm going to stay in foster care. You go live with your dad. And I'll hold it down here, kind of a thing. So I would rather it be her. She was younger. She had family in that state. I didn't have family in this state. I'm still waiting for my mom to come back and get me. So I'm staying with Miss Susan and Mr. Dave, and my sister goes off to live with her dad. So I'm, going through the motions. I think I'm in 7th grade-ish at this point.
So maybe 13-ish.
Yeah. I think it was like 11 to 12-ish.
Okay.
The foster mom ends up getting breast cancer. And I have to be placed in another home. And so, so that was super tough because I loved it there. Like I had so much love and compassion, and it's, to go from strangers to, your grandparents where it didn't work out because there was just too much drama going on, to someone who you actually enjoyed being with. And, it's so hard to find a foster home that treats you with respect, and then to get taken from that.
I'm so sorry.
Whew. Always makes me so emotional, but I'm so thankful for that family. I really am. But to get taken from that home that you just felt so safe and secure, and they were so patient and they just listened, and it was a love that I never really received before. And so it was really hard to be taken away from that. Like, oh my gosh, am I ever gonna get a family like this ever again? And of course I didn't. But yeah, so I want to say after this home was kind of where it came to that point. Cause obviously I think I'm hitting my teen years now. After I leave this home, it's like, okay, now I'm a teenager, and this is where I'm starting to develop, different feelings in my body and different thoughts. My brain is rewiring. And this was the peak in my development, in my, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to work in human services and be a social worker. But this was also the point in my life where I started to rebel because, I went from a home that was so understanding and patient and compassionate to homes that were, permissive and, either super strict or didn't care what I did. And so it was a little bit of inconsistency. And I want to say that was probably the peak of my experience in foster care.
Yeah. And both of those, it's hard to feel love in total strict, where it's like all control, or total freedom where no control, because both feel like the control is parenting out of like a fear or just, I just want to control you because I want you to do exactly what I want you to do.
Exactly.
And the other is kind of like, I don't really care what you do.
Right.
I'm guessing that's how it felt.
Yes. And so I went to a home after Miss Susan and Mr. Dave that was pretty permissive. She had a lot of toddlers in the home. I'm the only teenager. And so her focus is the younger kids, obviously, which totally understand. It's fine. But then, obviously I still had that piece of like, where's my attention? I just came from this family where I was the only child, and I got to do gymnastics and dance and stuff. And now I'm coming into a home where there's multiple kids, and I'm just kind of like put on the back burner, and now I'm helping with infants. And so the dynamic changed so much throughout, the moving process, that it was just like, oh my goodness, like, how do I cope?
Yeah.
It wasn't anything abusive or anything. It was just more of like, just a little bit of that permissive parenting. And then the next placement, this is like my 5th one. Yeah. So she was the 4th. This is the 5th. I end up going with a childhood grandmother, and back in Washington State. And so this was, very, exciting. I get to go back to Washington. This is what I know. I'm with another grandma that I am very familiar with. It was, it was exciting. And now I'm about to start middle school. So it's like right at that age. I think this was 8th grade.
Okay.
So I'm back in Washington. I'm like, what? I don't know, 13, 14.
Yeah.
And this is probably where the spiral starts to happen, like the real spiral downward just with my behavior in terms of, the rebellion and stuff like that. But in a nutshell, pretty much there was just a lot of trauma that happened just within the family itself, like not only in the home, but just with
Got it.
the family itself. And so, there was just, my grandma took care of a lot of people, and it was hard for her to get custody of me. They have to, as a foster parent, I know you have to go through so many classes and, you have to do a lot of things before you can become a foster parent. And so she did all of that. And then her daughter, which is my aunt, ended up getting murdered in 2012. So we took on her 2 kids. So now it went from only child again to now we have 2 more kids in the home. Again, obviously super traumatic. But during that time of having all 3 of us, there was some favoritism showed. Again, I felt like I was kind of pushed to the back burner a little bit. And so I did start to act out. There was different punishments like getting things taken away, or, I was really just told to go to school and come home. And so obviously when you take that kind of control away from a teen, they're going to do whatever they can to, be happy in their teen years. And so that's what I did. If you're going to take something away from me, I'm going to be sneaky and figure out ways to get it myself. And so I would sneak phones and, sneak outside at night because I wasn't allowed to go outside during the day. And so it was just little things like that I just didn't feel understood or heard. And it was just so interesting. And so obviously that behavior was just super overwhelming for my grandma, just the constant rebellion and just the lack of care that I had. Honestly, it's just kind of like I don't get to do this stuff. I have to sneak around and get it. So at this point, I'm just being a teen. I'm just, at this point. And so, it eventually led my grandma to pack up my things and drive me back to Oregon to be put in another home.
So first of all, thank you for being willing to share your story, because obviously this is not just some story about some person. This is your life that you have lived, and it still brings those emotions because it was very impacting and life shaping and altering. Do you remember how, like, every time you had to move, and maybe I'm sure some were different than others, but do you remember how people shared with you that you were going to be leaving? Or were there ever times where you weren't even really told, but you were just picked up?
Yeah. So I want to say for the most part, I was told, and honestly, every time, except for from the first moment, obviously that was hard, but the second moment was somebody that I knew. So that was, exciting. And they told me, yes, we have a new home for you. Yeah. Obviously we didn't know who it was going to be, but for the most part, yes, they would tell us, yep, you're going to have to go stay with someone new. When Miss Susan got cancer, obviously that was super hard for me to just leave that situation. And then when I left the other home, like the 5th placement, I was going to someone that I knew. So that was super exciting.
Yeah, sure.
But my grandma at this point in time, she did not tell me what was happening.
Okay.
She bagged up a lot of clothes that I came with, but she didn't bag up anything that she had bought me throughout the years that I stayed there. And so it's like all the new stuff that I got during Christmas or like birthdays, she kept and just bagged up the stuff that I came with. So it was very minimal. So I'm getting in the car thinking like, oh, she's just going to drop me off at my grandparents' house. Like it's not that many bags, you know? And so she was very sneaky with it. And then we got on the freeway and we started driving and we're going past and further. And I'm like, wow, she's really taking me back to Oregon. And I just start bawling in the car. Like, why wouldn't you just tell me that you're taking me back? You know, like that was super hard. Just to feel like someone had just given up on you and not even let you know. Like that's something that I honestly still sit with. And, you know, just try to process. But yeah, that one was pretty hard.
Yeah. And where did you go at that point?
So this would be my last home. At this point, I'm like 16. So I stayed with grandma in Washington for probably like 2.5 years. And so, yeah, this is the point where I'm
the same grandma that you had before. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. So this is, so this is what my 7th and final placement, where she drives me to Oregon, and I'm staying with a family that has older kids. And so it's just so interesting, the dynamic of how I'm going from, you know, being an only child and then having toddlers and then being an only child again and then having school age kids. And now I'm with all teens, and it's just no consistency at all. I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, but I finally felt like, okay, at least I'm with people of my age. But is this good or bad? Because now I'm with my age group, you know, like at this point I feel abandoned. I've been acting out the past couple of years. And now I'm living with, you know, teenagers or young adults. And so I'm like, perfect. This is great. No more little kids. I get to, you know, whatever. So I want to say that I really liked this placement. I mean, there were those things that, you know, could have improved, but I definitely want to say that this last placement was definitely way more understanding as far as, you know, just letting me have my space. It's something that I never got in my adolescence, was space. I mean, it's something that when you're a younger kid, obviously you need that supervision, and, you know, that's something that you don't really get. But as a teenager, you need space. You don't want someone breathing down your neck all the time, wondering where you're going, what you're doing. You don't want someone micromanaging your life. You want to have your privacy, your freedom, your flexibility, and the power to make choices for yourself, have a say in the activities that you want to do. So I feel like this last placement was super understanding. She let me go out and do activities. And that's when I started to develop trust with her, because it's like, okay, you're letting me go out. You're letting me go to the mall with my friends. You're letting me have responsibility to take the bus by myself and have a phone and, you know, go on dates, stuff like that. And, you know, it's things like little things like that to where now I'm behaving, because now I trust you and I'm going to tell you I'm going here and this is where I'm actually going. Whereas with my grandma, I'm telling you I'm going one place and I'm going a completely different place because I'm avoiding your punishment. But here I'm not getting punished. I'm actually being understood. I trust you because you hear me, you understand me, you don't try to micromanage, you ask me how I'm feeling, what I'm needing, what I'm wanting. Definitely still boundaries and discipline for sure. but it was just way more understanding and relaxed. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. So I just felt like I could actually be a teenager at this home. And it was great. We ended up going to Six Flags and, going to California, which I had never been to California. So that was so much fun. And so at this point, I'm back in Oregon and the judge sees me and she's like, oh my goodness, Serena, I keep seeing you here. Like, what the heck? You're about to be 17. Like, what's going on? And I'm like, you know what? I wish I could tell you. I've been in this courtroom since I was, 10. And so she basically just gave me the power at that point to choose where I wanted to go. She's like, you're about to be 18. I don't want you to have to keep moving around. And this is just so overwhelming and heartbreaking. So eventually I said, I want to go with my mom. That's where I want to go. And so 17 years old, senior year, I got to go back with my mom and finish high school in my hometown.
Wow. Wow. How was that stepping back in with your mom?
It was different for sure. Like who knew that day that I would be picked up in 5th grade would be the last time I would live with her until my senior year. Like, never imagined that. I'm sitting here thinking it's going to be like a month or two, and it ends up being 7 years. Super traumatic for both of us, for my mom, for me, and it definitely took some getting used to. It's like I had to learn who she was all over again. Like, okay, I just came from someone who let me basically do a lot of things that I've been wanting to do as a teen. Are you going to let me do those things? Or are you going to be strict? Are you going to be permissive? Like, what kind of parent are you, pretty much, Wow. And she did her best. She really did her best to really just listen to me and, be that parent that I really needed when I was 10. And so it was just so great to be back home with my mom, and I could just see her trying her best and trying to be understanding and still letting me go out and be a teenager and, really just showing up. And I had a new infant sister at the time. So it was so great to be a part of her upbringing. And it was just so great to be back home with my mom and rebuild that relationship with her.
Wow. Whatever happened with your other sister?
She ended up staying with her dad in Oregon. But I believe he was a little bit permissive. And so things got out of hand. And she ended up moving back with us in Washington. And I want to say she was, I think, her freshman year. So it was, I think I turned 18 and she moved back and finished high school up in Washington. So we got to reconnect, and that was cool too.
Good. I'm thankful for that.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting, Serena, about how you shared some of your behaviors. And I think this is an important piece, is a lot of times teens have certain behaviors that might be unwanted or unhealthy or negative, right?
Yeah.
But let's talk to the foster parent, specifically listening, and help them understand, like, maybe we should consider that there might be something going on beneath the surface that is really contributing to these behaviors.
Absolutely. I really love to look at behaviors as a flower, and I try to share this as often as possible because I think it's just a super good analogy. But when we're thinking about a flower, we have the bloom, and then we have the stem, and then we have the roots. And so oftentimes we only see the bloom. We see the flower, we see the petals, we see the behaviors, we see the back talk, we see the attitude, we see the cussing, the sneaking out. All those behaviors that kids and teens express is what we see. But we don't see the root. We don't see the feelings, the needs, the experiences, the trauma, the fight or flight responses. We don't see any of that. It's all underground. And so when you're thinking about a child's behavior, specifically a teen's, and you're seeing them acting out, you're seeing them either in their room all the time, closed off, or, they're being sneaky, or, whatever it is that they're doing, but you're not looking below the surface of, what are they feeling? What kind of foster home did they just come from? How old are they? What has school been like for them? There's so many different things underneath the surface that we have to take into consideration before we just judge that flower, before we just judge that behavior, so that we can really connect with that teen, figure out, okay, I'm not judging them about their behavior because they've obviously went through a lot. They're going through a lot. But what are they feeling, needing, and experiencing is the most important thing.
I love that. I love that. Not just what are they doing, but what are they feeling, needing, and experiencing. What are some good questions to ask our teens when you're maybe coming up against where you're having this conflict and this struggle and you want to break through somehow and you don't really know how? What's a good place to start?
Yep. So obviously we don't want to interrogate a teen. That's probably the quickest way to disconnect with a teen is, really trying to interrogate them, pester them. And teens know when you're just trying to, find out information or be fake, as they call it. But honestly, I think in the beginning phases, if you're getting a teen in your home, really just asking, what do you need from me? What would make this transition easy for you? How can I help you right now? The biggest thing is the need. What do you need from me? Do you need me to, put a mirror in your room because you like to, look at your outfits? Do you want to go to Walgreens and maybe get you some new makeup or, little things like that? Like what do you need? What would you need to help you feel more comfortable in this home? Sometimes and most times they're going to say, I just want to go to my room. Can you just show me my room? And I just want to sit there and just listen to music or watch TV. And then you can let them do that. And you can say, okay, absolutely. Show them their room. Maybe if you have a boundary set of, dinner's at 5:00, we eat at the table, let them know that before, they go in the room. But figuring out the need. How can I make this first day, as smooth as possible for you?
I love that. And what I heard in there too is some dignity, because you're going, do you need a mirror so that you can make sure everything's in order? Do you need a little makeup? Because like you said, like your grandma didn't pack all of your things and didn't give you an opportunity to pack your things. So they may have had that and maybe they don't now. So we don't want to assume that just because they didn't come with certain makeup, that's not the makeup they had just used the day before and loved. The things that can make us, or a deodorant, or like all of these things that just bring just a little bit of dignity in such a difficult transition.
Yes, I think shopping is really one of the biggest ways to really connect with an older child. Even those ones that are more reserved. I mean, everybody likes getting new things, especially in a transition. Again, we don't know what they're coming with. Getting them an outfit, getting them a new pair of shoes, again, like makeup, little things like that. I know that I used to get that almost every time I moved into a new home. Because I was either growing out of the clothes I had or, I'm a teen now. I don't wear that stuff anymore. So really maybe taking them shopping or going to see a movie or, something like that would be super, super helpful in that transition process. And it really shows transparency and how you're really trying to build that connection with that teen.
I like that. I think the movie thing is good too, because you're doing something together, but there's no pressure to we don't have to have this deep conversation.
Exactly.
We're doing something side by side.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sharing an experience. I know that you are particularly passionate, or I've seen, about actually helping foster parents and helping foster parents specifically with teens. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes. And so I'm still, getting my business off the ground, but I definitely hope to get connected with more foster parents. Teens can be pretty tricky. I know that they're the most, I don't want to say the most complex, but one of the most complex age groups that there's not a lot of resources and help out like there is for toddlers and preschoolers. And so, yes, I definitely love to help parents and foster parents with their teenagers.
Yeah. And one of the things that you like to do is really help the foster parent look deeper even in their own heart or in their own experience, or maybe healing that they might need. Why is that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I've recently discovered that our inner child is the one that has all the answers. And by answers, I mean the answers to our biggest challenges with our children. I'm finding that a lot of us are really looking for those solutions. How do I get my kid to listen to me? How do I work with a rebellious teenager? How? And the answer is in here. And it's so interesting because we have so much unresolved trauma within ourselves that is projected onto our kids and the kids that we take care of. And so with inner child healing, I'm able to dig deep and figure out, why are you so mad that your kid doesn't listen? Why do you want to control everything that your kid does? Why are you super bothered by their behaviors? And we're able to figure out, because you weren't allowed to do that as a child. Because you got yelled at for not listening.
Interesting.
Because you had to sit down and be quiet, and that was it. And so it becomes so much deeper when you're like, wow, yeah, I wasn't allowed to get away with a lot of the things that my kid is now doing. And so if I wasn't allowed to get away with it, they're not allowed to get away with it. When in reality, kids need a space to be kids. They need to make mistakes. They need to make messes. They need to, test limits and boundaries. This is how we learn, by making mistakes and, getting disciplined to learn how to make better choices. I mean, we can't just come into the world 100% knowing how to listen and follow directions and only sit down and be quiet. No, we want to play. We want to test limits. Absolutely. We want to make mistakes, and we need a caregiver to help us get through those things. And so with inner child healing, I'm able to get to the root of why, a lot of the behaviors are happening for the parent.
And a parent might not even recognize some of those things.
Exactly. Yeah. It took me a moment to realize, wait a minute, why do I want this kid to sit down and be quiet? Because I was told to sit down and be quiet.
Interesting. I know that with your experience as a teen in foster care, that really helps also. Do you ever, just because you can speak from personal experience, do you get the opportunity to speak directly to teens very often who are in foster care?
Not as often as I would like. My previous work experience, I did used to work at a youth home. I don't work there anymore, but I did work at 2 different youth homes, actually. So one was with kids from 12 to 17, and then the other one was 18 to 24. And so the 12 to 17-year-olds were the ones who actually had been removed from their foster home, put into this facility because their behaviors were way too extreme. So this was a point where their behaviors are too much for the foster parents to deal with. Now they're in this facility until we can find them a home to go to that can deal with their behaviors. And it was so sad to see, because it's like, I feel you. I feel you. I've never been to one of these facilities, but I've been taken from my home
passed
and
around,
put into a new one. And so, yeah, I watched a lot of, sneakiness and rebellion. These kids were on so much medication, which broke my heart, just with their different mental health. But I think one of the biggest things that I learned at that place was that behavior modification isn't always the answer. And what I mean by that is oftentimes when there's a kid with such extreme behaviors, like legal behaviors at this point, criminal activities, and we think that we can just put them in this place, take away everything from them, have them sit in this room, and they're going to think about what they did, and they're going to get therapy, and everything's going to just change magically one day. They're going to come back into society and be normal, whatever. In reality, that does more harm than good. So I've learned that these kids need to be understood. A lot of them were acting out because they were being micromanaged, because they were being punished, because they weren't heard or seen. They weren't understood. And by understood, I mean someone to just listen to them without criticizing and judging. And all a teen wants is to be accepted. I mean, we're out in the world getting judged by our peers in high school and middle school all day. The last thing we want is to come home and be judged and criticized by our parents for just being a kid. I mean, it's something as simple as I didn't clean my room and my mom's calling me a lazy slob. And that hits deeper than you realize. Because now my mom sees me as lazy, but really I'm a teenager and I'm messy. And that's just life. Understand that I'm going to clean my room, but I just got home from school and I want to decompress a little bit before I get into my chores, And so it's little things like that we don't realize.
So good to hear.
Yeah, that we don't realize are really affecting a teen. And so figuring out what those needs are, looking below that surface. What are you feeling, needing, and experiencing right now?
Yep. So kind of before we close out here, I know that you shared a little bit. You said there was something that's that you're still sitting with today on having some of those past experiences. What role has God for you played in your life and in your healing journey?
Really good question. God is doing his work constantly, and I'm just so thankful and grateful for him. But really, the biggest role that he plays is really just allowing me to take one day at a time. I think that oftentimes we can feel so caught up in our goals and what we have to get done, and all of our responsibilities, that we lose sight of, our healing process, and how it's okay that I got mad today. It's okay that I'm angry. It's okay that I am not okay. And I think that we try so hard to be perfect and happy and put on this facade that we're just happy all the time, when in reality, give your anxieties to God, and he is the one that will take on that burden for you. And it is okay to feel those big emotions. And so taking every day, one day at a time, and letting God, giving your problems to God, because he can take care of it and he knows what to do. We don't, he does.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I love it just brings peace to just remind ourselves. I mean, I've been sitting in the gospel, just listening to books about the gospel, just thinking about the work Christ did on the cross for us. Like, we don't have to be perfect because he is.
Yes.
He actually took everything, all of our sin on the cross. And he loves us so much. And I hear that in your story and the way you even spoke about him, and just to continue to embrace that love that he has given us. And I think that sometimes we think he doesn't want us to be happy or doesn't care about our happiness, but I'm just learning more and more. I think he does. He loves it when we're happy, when we're joyful, but he knows that true happiness, true joy actually comes from obedience to him. And so, just reminding that someone just told me recently that, now I'm going to forget this. Okay. Pause for 1 second. Oh, yes. Okay. Someone just told me recently that the law drives us to the cross. So the law drives us to the cross, but the cross frees us to obey. So we obey out of freedom. Anyways, I'm just really excited about the Lord.
Absolutely.
But yes, I love that, one day at a time. And healing takes time, doesn't it? And it's not just a linear experience. It's forward and back for all of us in whatever we're walking through.
Absolutely. Yes.
Well, Serena, I have really enjoyed having you on the show today. I just want to give you an opportunity before we close. Is there anything that you're like, I just really want to share? And maybe it's to a teen in foster care, or maybe it's to their foster parent. I'll give the floor to you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I would say to foster parents who have teens or just children in general, thank you so much for what you do. Like, it's just such a huge blessing to have foster parents, and there's not enough of them. And so the work that you're doing, regardless if you're still learning, if you're overwhelmed, if you're frustrated, if you're angry, know that it is okay to have those big feelings as a foster parent. That you are doing God's work just through taking these kids for this time. And so I thank you from the bottom of my heart for just everything that you're doing for our world and for our Lord.
Amen. Thank you, Serena.
Thank you.
Well, I hope that today's episode encouraged you wherever you are on your foster care journey. We want you to stay connected, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you will never miss an episode. Also, we have great content at theforgotteninitiative.org. Thank you for watching. I cannot wait to be with you next time.